Hello and welcome to Data Talks episode 2, where we're going to distill the trends of all things cloud into something pragmatically actionable. Well, that's the plan, but I know we have the right people to help us do that. And so I'll be your host on today's webcast, but joining me is cloud solution architect Shane Williams, who will help us grab some context for this. And then we're going to pivot over to a customer, Cohesity customer, Kalpesh Bhathella, Director of Operational Services from Ausenco, who will help us talk about how these trends are being brought into their everyday actions. And then we'll bring it home with Technical Director Jay White, who will show us how we could expect to see these trends be managed through your tools of choice at the time. And he'll be representing it obviously through Cohesity's tool suite and how these evolving trends get managed. So let's dive into what these trends actually are. And when I say trends, we're talking about things that are commonplace for 2024, 2025, and a bit beyond, what people are starting their planning for to help them prepare for transitions into these things, what their priorities are. That's where we're contexting this. Now, these trends come from largely the big three industry analysts and a handful of YouTubers and other internet folks. Now, I don't want to confuse these internet trends with Tide Pods or Ice Bucket Challenges or Bernie Sanders mittens. No, these are things that are brought together, and I don't have a list of top 5 or top 10. This is an amalgamation, so we actually landed on the number 8. Not very elegant or clickbaity, but I think it'll serve the purpose. And as I'm going through this list, I want to see if this resonates with you. So we'll have our chat open. We're going to get to a poll in a bit. But let's talk through what's been top of mind for analysts and folks on the internet in this space, talking about what's moving this industry. So you probably won't be surprised that AI gets a lot of buzz. AI is dominant in terms of where the interests seem to be, even if folks are struggling today to get some of these things implemented. But they see it as the democratization and taking advantage of LLMs to be able to lower costs and create speed and change staffing models, a whole bunch of things that's going to have an effect and an impact on. And it's so important as a topic, we're actually going to tee that up for our June episode. So please revisit for that conversation around AI. So there's trend number 1, how people want to use AI and looking for ways in which they can implement it. Number 2 is the hybrid and multi-cloud strategies. They're expecting to see a significant rise in organizations utilizing more than one provider. And these strategies offer a balance of security and flexibility, but they also come with challenges around governance and integrations for existing systems. The third trend on the list would be having to do with real-time cloud infrastructure and a surging demand for up-to-the-minute insights, fueling the need for data storage solutions like flash and solid-state storage devices that prioritize instant access. So more performance needs still kind of driving the envelope on the technology side for implementation. Then another big topic is cloud security. Now, we touched on this a bit in our overall security strategy in our last episode. And as it relates to cloud, it is both, as we mentioned last time, a destination for backups of on-prem, but also within cloud as it is used to be part of your overall response methodology. So overall security strategies is something that's been key to a lot of our cloud discussions. And then moving on from there, the providers moving towards net zero commitments, which frankly kind of surprised me. I didn't think this was going to be as much of a business driver as it appears to be from the data that's out there so far. There's also simplified cloud computing, and we know that people are moving from less specialists or fewer specialists to more generalists, and there are a lot more things that they have to manage. So they're looking for the cloud and cloud infrastructure to be easier to adopt through things like technology, through low code and no code toolings, drag and drop interfaces and such, to be able to kind of level the playing field for the skill sets of staffers they have. Number 7 on our list is helping businesses maintain data privacy and foster trust across their customer base, and also compliance. There's a whole series of new compliance rules that are coming out, and that is key to the decisions people are making and how they're making their investments and laying out their data plans and growth plans. And the last one would be serverless or pay-as-you-go cloud business models, where they're looking for agility, not just in the type of technologies they deploy, but the methodologies and cost models that they can use to do that. So with that as the backdrop, I want to pivot over and get your take, pivot over and get a poll from you guys to get your sense of which of these things are conversations that you've been having, and the types of things that you're having your business leaders come to you about. Are you getting questions from those? So can we pivot over to the poll? Can we pull that up? So I'd love to hear from you folks on, are you having conversations about implementing AI? Production team, can we get the poll going? I'm not seeing it on my side. Is it up? Okay. So in this poll, what we were hoping to achieve is your feedback, and you can put it in chat if you wish, but to get your feedback on implementing AI for either business or operational insights. I'd like to know how you plan to implement, or if you have already implemented multi-cloud environments. If you've chosen a couple of vendors, if that's been important to your growth strategy or your management strategy, we want to hear from you. Depending on our new dependencies for Flash and availability in the cloud, growing your security posture, or how you've worked out your workflows and response methodologies for security implementation through cloud technologies. Is your carbon footprint important to you at a business level? I know it's been a lot more important to us all at the individual level, but to see businesses going there, is this conversation that you've been having? Data privacy is both being thrust upon us from customer demand as well as legal compliance. And I can see that some folks are starting to fill this in. This is good. If we can get you to participate, it'd be helpful for us to move the conversation forward. And then business agility and the low code, no code tools to kind of level the playing field. So do we have our results? Yeah, looks like we do. It's a little too small on my screen, but hopefully, Shane, you're seeing some of this. So good. Well, with that in mind, I would like to, well, thank you for your participation on that. I'd like to bring in our first guest, cloud solutions architect here at Cohesity, Shane Williams, to help me put some context around not just the trends we started with some of the feedback we've seen. There's a lot to distill here, Shane. A lot of different directions people could be running in all different directions. How do you think we should try to compartmentalize and get our arms around these different directions we could be running?
Well, from my perspective, there's a top three that most of my meetings that I have with our customers that we see that are pretty popular. By far, the biggest is automation, being able to operationalize and optimize system management. One of the things that I saw in the poll that came back is multi-cloud. Having multiple clouds every day, we have to figure out ways to manage disparate systems, newer technology, more systems. And then with a multi-cloud initiative, you basically double and triple all of the management overhead. So almost everything that we need to do from a security posture, from compliancy, those are some big ones I saw in the poll that were there. All of that requires a level of automation and operationalization and optimization of all of those so that we don't need to hire hundreds more people to manage everything. So typically we have conversations that cover using software as a service when it's an opportunity. Having someone else manage all of the new technology as it comes around and the new systems and new features and new integrations is way less overhead for most of our customers, for everyone in the industry, really. Most of the industry is focusing just on that to try to lighten the workload and the burden when you have all of these other initiatives that you need to accomplish from the business side, and then having to manage everything, and then having to hire new people and train new people. It's overwhelming. And the less you can, or the more you can lower that overhead, the more successful you are, essentially. So those are the big ones, automation and operationalization of that.
So when we're talking about this cloud space, we're saying these were people who moved from on-prem to cloud for operational advantages, as well as their extended cloud growth. And those trend lines, you're saying that most of them are mapping to how are we getting more efficiency through these sort of automation and management tool suites. Is that?
Yeah, I mean, it's also both, right? So as you have more and more applications that are moving to the cloud and become more cloud native, and all your migration of all of your other infrastructure goes to the cloud, you can automate more and more. So you have the capability to automate more. So you need to automate more. You need to figure out ways to do that, whether it's software as a service or automation tool integration, with infrastructure as a service. That's a popular pursuant, configuration management, even pipeline integration, so that we're automatically deploying into a pipeline construct. Those are big things on that side. That's number one. Management's huge. It allows us to accomplish number two, number three that I see in the industry. Number two being data security, which came up, I think it was 55%, right? So that's a big one. being able to have tools to address ransomware. It's every day we hear in the news, right? There's another big one in healthcare this last week we heard. It's a weekly thing now. We need to be able to address that. We have multi-factor authentication initiatives that are disrupting businesses right now. Everyone's like trying to become more efficient, and yet we have these multi-factor layers that make us less efficient, but we have to try to accomplish and overcome that. Talk to a lot of customers about that. It's kind of like a double-edged sword. And even like incorporating like, like being able to air gap. Traditionally, we could turn off systems in the cloud. Obviously, you can't do that. You have to have a virtual air gap. And not only having an air gap to have immutability in your data, we don't want a compromised credentials. We see like with the ransomware every day, being able to take out and delete everything I have in every cloud, especially in multi-cloud, right? Like that becomes really a huge problem. But being able to have like advanced capabilities around that, like even quorum witness workflow and advanced auditing capabilities that are wrapped around immutability, like combining those together, huge for our customers. So on the security side, those are also almost every meeting that we have covers that, security and automation. And then DR is a big one as well. And that's probably number 3, I'd say. Really, we're worried about having a region outage. We hear about it all the time. A business disruption like that can cost a lot of money and put a lot of lives at risk, depending on your industry. So those discussions are predominantly on every single like list of every C-level person in every organization, right? So being able to say, hey, can I recover to a region? And then even I have a really smart colleague comment here last week saying, yeah, we have discussions about what considerations you have from an architectural perspective when you recover to a region. Is the new region going to be overloaded, with traffic because of a disaster? So considering that, or a lot of the discussions we have, it's like, what is it going to look like? So things like, hey, maybe we can push things into another provider since we're multi-cloud, and assuming that provider's not going to be as busy when we have the disaster. So those types of discussions are very, very popular. They comprise a large percentage of the conversations I'm having in the industry, and figuring out solutions to accommodate those and solve for that is essentially where I spend all my time. For the most part, 99% of the time are those 3 things.
So let me see if I can play some of this back. So you're saying a lot of the advantages that people are looking for, not just from AI, but from cloud in general, is this centralized management, this ability to get processes and scripting and other sorts of automation in place first, is sort of driving the efficiency of the business first. And those security aspects that they need to pull in, whether it's as backing up on-prem to the cloud or operations within the cloud, those security components, they're looking for the same operational pieces as it relates to security that they're doing for the rest of their business. And then with DR, you're saying this is also not just an on-prem to cloud. This is a within whatever you've got cloud, because it's not just one on-prem location to a specific provider. You're talking about different geographies that are supporting that from within a particular provider, all within that sort of broader automation factor.
Yeah, and automation really allows you to accomplish those other 2 things faster and more efficiently. It's time to market. It's whatever you want to call it in your particular business, but automation and operationalizing and basically system management optimization is all allows you to do that faster. It's kind of about data velocity, right? It's how fast can you meet your goal, and how fast can you complete your initiatives that are pushed down on you from the management that's driving the business. So automation's key to that. The more you have things automated, the faster you can do that. And that's typically why that's the highest priority from what I see.
And it relates to both bucket 2 and 3. And first, if you have that first, then adding those others with those operational efficiencies in mind, they all kind of relate to each other. What do you think?
And it also is like, when I say automation, it's other people automating for you, right? So essentially that's software as a service. That's why that model is so popular. It's like, I want to automate things, but I want somebody else to do it. So that's why the barrier to adoption for that is so low, and it's so popular right now.
Right. So when you're looking at implementing these things, the strategy to avoid some of these headwinds, what does that look like for you in terms of the prioritization of pulling these things in?
Well, it's proper planning. From my perspective, I'm an architect, so I learn a lot about people's environments and what they're trying to accomplish, and I get too far into the nitty-gritty details. But the first step is understanding things from my perspective, and then a lot of times you can bring in knowledge after you understand all the pieces and parts. But I think the first step to doing all of this, the easiest thing is to let someone else do it. But of course, from in my experience, I learn a lot about an environment and present solutions to accomplish that. And the solutions can be a combination of the backend automation or software as a service. And it really depends on the business and what they're trying to accomplish and what they see as a success criteria. But to answer your question, architecturally, it takes some planning, but yeah. So understanding
the decision
and
tree
planning.
that goes along with that is, first, can I have a SaaS model? Can I get someone else to do it? Is really the first question in your decision tree of things. And
usually that is not my decision tree. That's typically our customers have like a workflow, right? And it's like, number one, can we use SaaS? And that's kind of how most people approach it. There's reasons for it and for not doing it, but our largest customers use both typically.
And then, speaking of the both aspect, we did see both in the surveys and in the trend, the multi-cloud providers, different providers for different sort of use cases, or what's sort of the thinking that people are calculating when they're going through that, and what considerations should they have in mind when going to multiple providers?
There's a couple of trends. Typically, there are business requirements that are seated in, are we cloud native, or are we moving from on-prem? Different providers do a different job and have better core competencies of accomplishing that. So that's why you typically see like a hybrid approach to that. What I'm seeing lately is there is a security paradigm where we need to have security fault isolation, where we have different providers that we're using for security in case we have compromised authentication issues, right? Where we have credentials being compromised, and we have a completely separate security zone and a separate provider with separate keys where we can recover that data from. DR considerations, where how busy is a specific provider in a specific region going to be busy so we can pull that data out of. We have conversations about that. And it goes above and beyond like what kind of workflows we're running. There's the relationships at the top end of the executives with the different cloud providers. Everyone that I talk to has a multi-cloud initiative, and it could be because of business requirements, or it could be because of security requirements, governance requirements. There's a lot of different reasons. There's so many different reasons that everyone has a multi-cloud approach to things. And you don't want all your data essentially locked into a single provider. I guess you do want some sort of leverage with your provider so that they understand that there's more, your data's in more places than just theirs. I mean, that's always a consideration. But yeah,
that's
so
fantastic.
Those are the different reasons for choosing a multi-cloud like initiative. And I'm sure from the polls that we saw, the customers that are on here would agree, and the practitioners of the cloud probably understand that very clearly. Yeah.
That's awesome. Well, Shane, thanks for bringing clarity to this and context to these cloud trends. Thank you for your time and enlightening us all with that perspective. I would like to bring in our next guest at this point and let us hear how real customers are using these things on a daily basis. I'd like to introduce Kalpesh Bhathella, a global infrastructure specialist and IT management leader with Ausenco. He has a proven track record in fostering innovation across various technologies, infrastructure projects. He has hands-on experience with cloud infrastructure, vendor management, and emerging technologies. Kalpesh, thanks for being on with us today. How you doing?
Pretty good. Thanks for having me.
It's great to have you here. So much that we've already covered, just kind of getting to the table stakes of what are inspiring people, what's motivating people right now in their cloud journey. I was wondering, just as a starting point, do you think you could get us caught up with what's in your infrastructure today? What does your Kingdom daily operations footprint look like? Can you get us a general picture of what that is?
Yeah, so we have probably around 3,000 people globally using a lot of engineering applications. Right. Right now, our environment, I would say, is hybrid. Right. So a mix of on-prem and cloud.
So when you say go globally, you're talking about different geos that you're supporting. You have different applications running around the globe, serving different audiences and constituencies. Is that what you're hearing?
Yeah, for sure. So we have we're a multinational company. We have about 26 offices in about 15 countries. We manage over lots of projects in probably over 80 locations worldwide. So a big footprint for sure.
Wow, that is impressive. So if that is the Rome in which you are the overseer, Rome was not built in a day. Can you tell us a little bit about your journey that got you from maybe where you were 5 years ago to this global cloud provider of services that you're providing across the company globally?
I would say we've evolved our infrastructure over the years. We kind of now we're at a point that where we kind of do a cloud first approach, if it makes sense, right? But back in the day, it was mainly on-prem stuff, right? And one of the key drivers to kind of evolve our infrastructure was that business agility, right? And user experience. I would say those were the two main business drivers to kind of bring forward our infrastructure to where it is now, where it's sitting at a hybrid type of model, where we kind of look at like I said, a cloud first approach.
Really, you're talking about agility. Is that also a key word, the way some people think about operationalization, or that type of, hey, I can use fewer people, more built-in services within SaaS that I don't have to manage as much, and that's the thinking behind why you go there?
100%, right? It was
Okay.
it was really that operational. That was one of the key factors where it kind of drives us forward, right? Into automation and all that kind of stuff, right? SaaS,
Okay.
right? We always look, if we need something, we always look at SaaS first.
So within that decision tree, I often hear what the business needs, but that may not be the business owners. It may not be engineering coming to you or marketing or sales coming to you. It's you saying to yourself, hey, I have to support this stuff. What's the best way I can do that? Or is it often the business teams coming to you and saying, hey, we need this level of performance. We need this level of accessibility globally, or whatever it might be for these particular applications. It's kind of a burn the candle at both ends type of thing to get to those answers.
Yeah, I would say it's probably like a burn the candle at both ends type of thing. So it sometimes it evolves from a business requirement from the actual the business teams, or it's us strategizing how we can support the business better in the next 3 years or the next 5 years.
Do you have an example of one of those business requirements?
User experience was a key one, right, as a business requirement, because in terms of, because we use a lot of engineering applications, right? We were doing the engineering application that we're using right now. We were using it as a SaaS type of service, right, from the provider, but it wasn't giving the speed that it needed, right, to get the job done, right? There was a lot of issues and all that kind of stuff, so we had to bring it in house. And so we kind of, made it like a localized, right? We still use the cloud technology as that footprint grew, or we needed more performance. We were able to scale that as the business kind of demands on the software were, right? So we kind of brought it in house, meaning that we built it on cloud infrastructure on our own.
And then you were able to kick the tires, pressure test it, and then expand on that.
Correct. Yeah.
Awesome.
And that was something that kind of came from the business, right? Because it was something that it was a service that we paid for, and the provider was providing it, but it wasn't ticking all the boxes in terms of user experience.
You heard Shane mention some of those drivers that people are kind of winnowing the list down to their kind of top three things, and I believe he had it as operationalization. He had DR and business continuity, and he had security as kind of the main drivers. Are those things that resonate with you? Has that been part of your conversation and process for what's been the most important drivers for you, or key considerations for your cloud environments?
Yeah, for sure. I think I would say the main driver when we started going on this journey was that operational efficiency, right? So how do we become more efficient? How do we kind of automate things? How do we free up our resources to do value add business projects, right? That were a little bit more visible or more important to the business, right? And then, security as well, right? Then how do we, replace security, right? So everything that we do, security, is like a wrapper around it.
Right. Now, is that coming to you from security teams or stuff that you just know inherently as part of your organization, how that gets prioritized, or do you have outside sort of checklists that you need to answer to?
Yeah, I would say it's probably inherent in our, business and our culture that we kind of look at these types of things in anything that we do.
So to prioritize this list, that those top three things, it really was, how do we get from on-prem to the cloud for what's best for that dual set of requirements between the business and yourselves as an IT infrastructure? The operationalization piece really was the highest priority. You started there. It wasn't, hey, let's do our backups there first, or hey, let's have our security backups there, immutability, that sort of thing. You were actually starting from the business drivers first, and then the other three aspects were also kind of came along for the ride. Is that correct?
Yeah, 100%. And that's exactly, the way I look at it, right? Because if you start with the backups and stuff like that, and for sure, there are companies out there that start from there. But for us to get that business buy-in, we had to kind of look at, okay, how do we needed to sell the efficiency. What gains did we get back from our resources? And then that was when things started to get approved relatively quick.
So you mentioned kind of a SaaS first or a cloud first, SaaS first model, and that includes your backup organizations for your organizations in the cloud as well.
Yeah.
You're a customer, so how's it been working out for you using Cohesity as a SaaS environment?
I would say I wrap it up in one simple word. It's really easy, right? From the implementation to the full operational state, everything was pretty easy. Even our interactions with support was pretty easy, right? So it's been, one of the easiest implementations and companies I've worked with.
That's awesome. Great to hear you say. So it basically came out the way you drew it up on the whiteboard about what you wanted to do.
Basically, right?
That's fantastic to hear. So as you were making those considerations towards those other use cases beyond operationalization, it's backups, it's for security, were you having discussions about immutability and air gapping and things like that, not just for your backups, but for other aspects of the applications you have in play?
Yeah, for sure, right? And I think that any type of technology that we kind of look at, right, and especially in terms of data resiliency or technologies such as that, immutability and air gap, data is top of mind, right? Not only because in this day and age, I feel that it is probably a requirement, but it also plays into if you're going to get cyber insurance or not, right?
A checklist item for both sides to make sure it's on there.
Yeah.
Okay. So I'm really glad to hear that your experience has been good and everything's been optimized as you planned in terms of not just the immutability, but how you're getting all those other security implementations rolled out. In Shane's summary, he also mentioned sort of contemporary trends and the things that I was listening and kind of was general for the news. But if you think about what you're trying to implement for 24, 25, what's been top of mind for you to try to get those things implemented within this sort of year cycle? What have you been prioritizing?
Yeah, I would say, I think, AI is, a pretty hot topic. I'd like to kind of see how, AI evolves within the Cohesity product and, and at what use cases it starts to solve.
That's I'm glad you're teeing that up for us because that's one we're going to get into next time. So thanks for bringing that up. But let me ask you then, in terms of what's happening today, are you getting requests from people within your organization or management change saying, hey, we need to consider or implement particular AI applications or business advantages through AI? Are they looking for that now? Are they coming to you now?
For sure, and I think that's the media or the internet or wherever you hear AI is everywhere. So I think that kind of drums up the interest. So now we have business coming to us probably on a daily basis to understand how we can use AI to better the business processes that they're involved in.
Okay.
Yeah. So how can we use that? How can we use that now and and make things easier for our employees and the business itself.
That's great. Fantastic. Well, this has been very helpful. Thank you so much for bringing your expertise and experiences to the call, and really appreciate your time. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Now I'd like to bring in Cohesity Technical Director and close personal friend of my boss, Jay White. Jay, thanks for being on the webcast with us today.
Thanks for having me, Jake.
Yeah, so you're hearing these three buckets kind of getting kicked around now by Shane and by our customers about operationalization, DR business continuity, and isolation for security purposes. Can you give us some sort of what that experience should look like from the vendors they're selecting at this point? What's the expectation of how this should be managed? Can you give us some insights on it?
Sure, absolutely. So I think there's lots of table stakes that are kind of coming to the surface now as we move forward into the future here, especially as AI comes into the picture. But I don't want to spoil anything for the next episode. But I'd say outside of so I put together a demonstration video here that we'll look at here in a moment. But before we take a look at that, one of the concepts that you really can't demonstrate is what we commonly refer to as separation of duties. And what this really talks about is when you have a hybrid environment that's on-prem and in the cloud, whether it's multi-vendor or not, you really have this whole layer of what's called identity and access management, or IAM. It comes in some different forms, like Entra ID for Azure as an example, or IAM for Google or for AWS, but everybody has this, right? And that adds a whole nother layer of both user and programmatic access into your cloud, right? That you need to manage, you need to secure, but really it adds a whole nother layer of risk for a company, right? To have that cloud account be compromised, which is what Shane talked about, right? It's clearly top of mind for customers. And when we start to leverage things like the Cohesity Data Protect as a service offering and Fort Knox, which is the two things we'll take a look at in the demonstration video, what these provide you is not only the kind of second copy or the air-gapped backup or that sort of things, which we do talk about a lot, but it also gives you copies that are outside of that realm of identity and access management of your cloud accounts, you being the customer, right? And so if your cloud accounts are compromised, there's really no association, right, to Cohesity's service, right? In order to attack, one of the great, risks of all this is if your cloud account is compromised, they can attack both your production and your backup infrastructure with that one compromise. And so by putting it in a service like Cohesity, and not saying it has to be us, I'll just be neutral since this is for the industry, right? But there's only so many out there. But a service like what we're going to see today, right? It provides you not just that air gap, but that separation of duties. They would have to attack not only your compromised cloud accounts, but somehow figure out how to hack into the Cohesity service, and not only just the service, but that customer specific infrastructure and backups within that service. And nothing is a 0.00% chance, but it is microscopically low for a bad actor to be able to achieve that, right? And so it's really about having that secure second backup. Running clusters and stuff natively in your cloud account doesn't protect you from those compromised cloud credentials. So I think with all that in mind, unless you have
that's a really important perspective to frame this up. Thank you for that.
No problem. Okay, so with all that in mind, let's jump in. We'll take a look at the video, and then we can wrap up.
Good.
You can see that the recovery option is running now since the request was just approved. Clicking the recovery task shows us the details of the recovery operation. Let's wait for the task to complete. We can see that the task has completed successfully. For the demonstration today, we're going to start in our Data Protect as a service offering, and we're going to focus on operationalization across your cloud accounts and EC2 cross-region recovery. After that, we'll dive into our Fort Knox product to cover our air-gapped archive solution. Here we are on the sources page in our Data Protect as a service offering, and what you can see is we have multiple cloud service providers registered. That's AWS, Azure, M365. And within AWS, we've registered multiple accounts. It can be challenging, especially when using multiple accounts or multiple subscriptions, to gain an understanding of what is and is not being protected across your entire cloud footprint, not just within the context of a single region or a single account or subscription. There are many ways that Cohesity provides insights across your entire cloud footprint. Today we're going to focus on 3 of those: the activity page, our global search functionality, and our reporting. Let's navigate to the activity page. The activity page shows you backup and recovery activity. The filters located here at the top help you narrow down what you're going to see listed on this page. You can see that many things are listed currently and they span many different object types. Let's filter down this list to just Amazon EC2 backups that have occurred within the last 12 hours. I can click on the filter, I can select past 12 hours and apply that. Then under source type, I can go to AWS, Amazon EC2. Now you can see the list is just showing us what we want to see and not everything in the account. As you can see, there's EC2 backups spanning both accounts, the account ending in 9386 and the account ending in 2153. From here, we can hover over any of these backups, click the 3 dots on the right, and take some different actions. For example, recovering, whether that's the entire EC2 instance or files. We can also add legal hold from here for this particular backup. Let's change it up a bit and we'll look at all Azure activity within the last 30 days. So I'm going to remove the AC2 filter. I'm going to change my source type to Azure. I'm not going to select Azure VM or SQL. I'm just going to click the top level here, Azure. And then I'm going to say last 30 days or past 30 days. After a moment, you can see everything loads here. And the best way to think of this page is it's going to show you all of your different backup and recovery points that are available to you. Global search can take this to the next level. At the top, you can see there's our global search field. I can enter a wildcard and press enter. The results will span all objects Cohesity has discovered across all sources, and this is regardless of their protection status. There are filters on the left side of the page here that help us process the data presented to us. As you can see, much like before, this spans all cloud accounts and subscriptions, and so helps consolidate information across all of those entities. Additionally, one of the key differences between this page and the activity page is we can look at unprotected items. So not just protected items, but unprotected items. So if I say unprotected, I can see across all of my cloud accounts here which objects are unprotected. Additionally, I could narrow this down and say I just want to see what's unprotected in, say, US East for AWS. You can see I have several buckets. I have an RDS database, and I have some EC2 instances down here at the bottom that are unprotected. I can click any one of these objects, and over here on the left, it will load some information about that object. You can see here the size of it. I could protect it from here. I could also check the box and protect it from up here. So it allows me to take direct action against the results that have been filtered down in the list here. Finally, let's take a look at a report. I'm going to exit the global search page, and I'm going to go down here to reports. As you can see, there's several reports that we have. These can be scheduled, exported as PDF, emailed to yourselves on a regular basis, whatever you want. The specific report we're going to look at is service consumption. And one of the big questions when you're trying to understand your capacity needs for the future or what you're consuming is daily change rate. And one of the great things about this report, if I scroll down, is I can see for each protected object in the environment, I can see what that daily change rate is. And this aids greatly in understanding what your capacity needs will be for the future. Now let's transition to protection of EC2 instances across a region. I'm going to come up here to my sources page. And before we get into the specifics of EC2 protection, let's talk briefly about our private data path connectivity. Cohesity uses what's called a SAS connector to bridge the customer's AWS account and their network into the data plane of the service. VPC private endpoints for S3 and EBS are used to keep traffic secure and private when traversing into the data plane of the service. With the understanding that data path traffic is private, secure, and encrypted, let's proceed with the EC2 demonstration. As you can see here, I have the same AWS account ending in 9386 registered twice. The reason for that is each of those entries is storing its backup data in a different service region. So for this bottom entry, this source stores all of its backup data in US West Oregon in the service. Likewise, for the one above that, US East is where it's storing its backups. This gives Cohesity the capability to do cross-region fault-tolerant backups for AWS. If I protect in this bottom source, an EC2 instance running in US East 2 or 1 or whatever other region, its backup will be stored in US West, Oregon. If that region becomes unavailable, I can still fall back to the backup in US West. So US East 2 goes offline, I can recover that instance in US West, Oregon. With that in mind, let's proceed with recovering an instance from US West, Oregon into US East 2. I'm going to click on this source. Once it loads, you'll see here I have this Linux 01 EC2 instance. It's already protected. I'm going to come over here. I'm going to select Recover. And I don't want to go back to US West 2. I want to recover this US West 2 EC2 instance into US East 2. And so I'm going to select New Location. I'm going to select the same source, but I'm going to select a different region. So I'm going to come down here. I'm going to select US East Ohio. That's where I want to recover. I don't have to add a key pair, but I will. I do have a key pair for US East 2 for 9386. I'm going to select that. And a unique feature of Cohesity at this point is the ability to apply encryption during recovery. Now, this particular EC2 instance wasn't encrypted originally. If it was, you would see encryption settings listed here, but it was not. I do have the capability, however, to apply encryption during recovery. So if I say yes, or I turn this on, I can apply a KMS key from the same AWS account or a different AWS account. Some customers out there I know with many AWS accounts, they use a single AWS account to just manage KMS keys that are used across all of their AWS accounts. So this gives you the ability to specify a key from the same or a different AWS account. We're not going to turn on encryption during recovery here. We're going to proceed and select a subnet. In this particular case, this is the VPC I want to go to, and I'm going to put it inside of its private subnet. I'm going to select the security group. I'm going to come down here. I do want the EC2 instance to be powered on, but I am going to change the name of this to recovery dash. You can also add a suffix here if you want to, and then I'm going to click off of that. And then at this point, we look good. We're going to recover to US East Ohio. I'm going to say recover. The recovery task is going to be submitted now. And once that's submitted, I can come over here to the activity page, and I can see my recovery task here is running. I can click on the task to access the details of that recovery task. And down here where the EC2 instance is listed, I can click on that entry, and I can actually follow along and see the log of the recovery activity as it occurs. I'm going to say close and wait until the recovery task completes successfully. Here we can see that the recovery task has completed successfully. It says succeeded here. Down here we can see for the EC2 entry, it's succeeded. I can go back to my activity page, and I can also see the recovery task at the top here, and it's succeeded. Let's go over to the AWS console, and currently we're in US West, Oregon. You can see that up here. Let's flip over to US East, Ohio. And once that loads, we're going to see here, if I go down a bit, here's our recovery ATSO CCS US West 2 Linux 01. This is the recovered VM. It's running and it's happy. And we've completed the successful recovery of the EC2 instance from US West 2 into US East 2. Now we'll transition from EC2 recovery over to the Fort Knox Cloud Vault recovery and the quorum approval process. To begin, we'll log in as a backup user who will submit a VM recovery operation. The recovery operation will require quorum approval. This user does not have the ability to approve the recovery operation through quorum. After logging in, you can see the dashboard. The topology section of the dashboard shows you which of the clusters are archiving the specific vaults in the service. Under Cloud Vault, we'll click on Protection. This page displays the protection groups that are currently archiving the vaults in the service. Here you can see all the protection groups that have run. We can also see the protection policies that are in use as well. Next, we'll look at quorum. Under Security, we can click on the quorum page. As you can see, there's no pending requests at the moment for this user, but let's take a look at the Groups tab, which shows us the groups that can approve quorum requests. I click on my request to see what requests I've submitted, and I don't currently have any requests that haven't already been approved at the moment. But let's initiate a new VM recovery request now, which will require the request to be approved by quorum. Under Cloud Vault, I can click Recoveries. I click Recover, Virtual Machines, then VMs. I'll select the cluster I will recover to, then click Select. I can then search for the VM I want to recover. Wildcards are supported when searching, but I'm going to enter the specific name of the VM here. I see the VM listed and I select it, which by default shows it's recovering from a local copy. I can click the pencil icon to choose a different recovery point. From this page, I can click on the vault icon to tell it to recover the VM from the vault directly. Now I'll click Select Recovery Point. Clicking Next, I can see the recovery task details. We'll use the defaults here, but update the name of the recovered VM by adding a prefix, Cloud Vault Dash. I can click the Recover button to submit the task for quorum approval. To approve the request, we're going to log out, then log in as a user that is a quorum approver. After logging in, we can go to Quorum, and here we can see there is a request pending. We can click on the request to see the details. Here we can click Quorum Members to see who can approve this request. In this case, we'll need 2 approvals to allow the request to be fully approved. We can click the Approve button, add any comments we want here, then click Approve again. If we go over to All Requests, we can see the request is partially approved. Only 1 of 2 approvals is complete. We'll log out and back in as another quorum approver that can finish approving the request. After logging in, we'll go to Quorum. And we can quickly approve it this time just by hovering over the entry and clicking the checkmark icon to approve the request. Now if we look at all requests, we can see the operation has been fully approved. Let's log out and log back in as the original first user that submitted the request. After logging in, we can go to Quorum, and we can check on our request to see the request for recovery is now fully approved. Going over to Recoveries, we can see that the recovery option is running now since the request was just approved. Clicking the recovery task shows us the details of the recovery operation. Let's wait for the task to complete. We can see that the task has completed successfully, which concludes recovering from Fort Knox with quorum approval.
This is awesome, Jay. Thank you for providing the context and letting us see how all of these concepts can come together in the single UI. Super, super helpful. Thanks.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So I want to thank all of our guests for pulling this stuff together and helping us gather context for this broader conversation of cloud. And we're going to, well, first of all, Shane and Kalpesh from Ausenco, thank you for your time and being a part of this. Super helpful, at least for me. I'm going to ask for your input through a survey, of course. No webcast is complete without a survey, but it really does make a difference. If you want us to tune this more in the direction of particular concepts or the technical depth in which we address these, all of that feedback would certainly help us make this as useful as we can for your participation. So please do tune in for the June episode on AI. And with that, I want to thank all the production staff and have a great afternoon.